One of the Heartwood Guitar members, Bob, asked me about the story regarding my old Martin guitar and how it got run over by a car. And so I thought I'd tell you the story. So first of all, this is the guitar that I learned how to play on. I remember opening up the case in my living room when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and smelling that antique wood and just falling in love with the smell at first. And I knew it was kind of an unusual looking guitar. It looked very old to me. Eventually pulled it out and found a chord book underneath it, like a beginner instructional book, and learned my first chords. I heard it through the grapevine, the bass line. I think the CCR version was on the radio at the time. And so something like that. I learned how to play that as my first song. And this is an old guitar. It's a 1952 Martin, I think. 015 model, all mahogany body. And it's a wonderful guitar. I especially love the way that it sounds played finger style. I usually capo it around capo 3 or capo 5, and it has this wonderful, warm, clear sound. So I played this guitar all through high school, and I was going into school one day and was waiting in this parking lot for my friend Justin to pick me up. And my book bag and my guitar were sitting there on the pavement, and another friend, Gary, I'm not going to use his real name, pulled up, and I think kind of wanted to startle me in this kind of friendly, joking way by pulling right up to my stuff and then stopping. And I didn't really think he was going to run over my stuff. And so we, exchanged a few friendly epithets through the window. And then he took off, and I think he forgot that my stuff was in front of his car. And so the main thing I noticed was that my book bag was getting drugged by his car as he drove away. And so I ran after him and cursed him, and the book bag kind of burst open and my books flew out. And, I was kind of upset about that, but it wasn't that big a deal. Picked up my stuff, and then I walked back and I noticed my guitar case lying there, and I'm like, oh no, he didn't run over my guitar, which was really my mom's guitar. I very much felt like I was borrowing it. And so I got back to the case and opened it up and saw cracks. You can still see them along the soundboard here. And this whole part here had just exploded. It was just this gaping, ragged hole. And I just started crying. And that's how Justin found me when he pulled up a few minutes later to pick me up to go to school. And so when I got to school that day, I confronted Gary in the hallway and told him what had happened. And he gave me this like really brief, unsatisfying apology, just like, oh, sorry. And I kind of looked at him like, is that it? And he looked back at me and he said, dude, it's just a guitar. And he walked away. And so it's still hard to tell that story. So for a couple decades, this guitar hung on my wall. And when I started teaching guitar, it hung in my studio. And when students would ask about it, I tell them that story, in part because I want them to know that it's not just a guitar, that the instruments we love are more than just pieces of wood. There's so much history and so many memories wrapped up in this thing. It's really part of my identity. And so it hung there, and I had this dream that even though the guitar just looked destroyed, I had brought it to a luthier before and asked them if it was if it could be fixed, and they said, yeah, really anything could be fixed. It would just cost a lot of money. And so I just figured maybe someday if my ship ever came in, I would pay someone to fix it. And so it hung there on the studio wall for years. And I was teaching okay, so there's one other part of the story that I wanted to share. We had a 25-year reunion at my high school quite a while back. And I didn't get to go, but Justin did. And Justin was friends with Gary, this other friend who'd run over the guitar until this happened. And kind of out of loyalty to me and anger at Gary, Justin severed the friendship after that. And Justin was better friends with him than I was at that point. And so at the reunion, Gary was there. And as soon as he saw Justin, he came up to him. And the first thing he said was, you know, Justin, I just want to let you know that I didn't mean to run over Rob's guitar. And boy, when Justin told me that later, I had a whole mix of feelings. But a lot of it was relief, because it was apparent that that day had been eating at him too a little bit. It showed me that he did care, that he did know that it wasn't just a guitar. So anyway, years later, one of my students, John, who's a great luthier, he was noticing my guitar on the wall, and he was talking about, you know, what he might do to repair it if he were working on it. And I just thought it was kind of an intellectual discussion. And eventually he said, I told him, you know, John, I would love to hire you to fix my guitar. You know, if I ever had the money, I would do it in a heartbeat. And he just responded with, oh no, I'd do it for fun. And I was just like, okay. And I couldn't believe it. And so he spent months on this guitar, and look at this craftsmanship. I don't know how well you can see this, but this is the new piece of wood here, and this is old wood. And here's the line. He preserved kind of the shape of the jagged hole. This wasn't like, you know, a clean cut here. He was able to merge these two pieces of wood in this very organic way. I think he said he sprinkled ebony dust in with the glue here to give it that dark color. And it's noticeable, but really beautiful. It looks like the two pieces of wood are like melting together. And also with the cracks in the soundboard, he didn't try to hide the cracks. The guitar getting run over is part of its history, and neither of us saw any point in trying to try to erase what had been done. But he was able to reinforce it with just a minimal amount of bracing. And it's hard for me to remember what the guitar sounded like when I had last played it in high school. But to my ears, it still sounds as good as it did back then, as far as I can tell. I still love the sound of it. So I think he did a phenomenal job. It was one of the greatest gifts I've ever received.